The U.S. Department of Education says federal student aid provides about $120 billion each year in grants and loans to help students pay for college. President Donald Trump's plan to dismantle the Department of Education has many people wondering about the future of financial aid. Kiona Rivera talked with Minot State University's financial aid director about what it could mean for students.
For more than 3 decades, federal student aid has allowed millions of Americans to pursue higher education. The U.S. Department of Education oversees the program. For weeks, President Donald Trump has hinted at plans to eliminate the Education Department. Minot State University financial aid director Laurie Weber says they aren't exactly sure how this will affect financial aid if it does happen, but there is one thing for sure. Financial aid will not go away.
The programs can't be eliminated without Congress's participation. A swipe of a pen, an executive order, doesn't mean that those programs just failed to exist. They will continue to exist unless Congress takes action to change that.
President Trump plans on pushing Congress to approve the idea, but it's been shot down multiple times. Weber says this doesn't mean there won't be any financial help for students.
With all the buyouts and the elimination of positions, there's sure to be some fallout in terms of service and the timeliness of responses.
Weber says about 80% of students at Minot State received some type of financial aid last year. Although this topic may seem overwhelming for some, Weber reassures students not to panic or feel discouraged.
Proceed as normal in the midst of this sort of bumpy area. I think we will potentially experience delays, but don't give up and don't decide not to go to school because of it.
Federal student aid includes programs like Pell Grants, work study, and student loans, all authorized under the Higher Education Act. At the Minot State University campus, I'm Kiona Rivera, reporting for your news leader.
Now, President Trump wants to eliminate the Department of Education as part of his overall plan to downsize the federal government. An executive order to eliminate that department is expected to be talked about this week.